Hello and welcome to Canto by Canto. My name is Daniel Davies and I'm a PhD candidate in English at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm joined today by Phil O'Mara. Phil earned his PhD from Notre Dame in 1970 and is Professor Emeritus at Bridgewater College. And we're here to talk about Paradiso 30, which, I'm in Houston, Texas right now. And so being able to contemplate something that is all about transcendence and leaving and moving beyond us is pretty welcome as we re-enter the coronavirus lockdown.
Indeed.
Yeah, so...
I'm in a safer spot. We have very few victims in Lexington, Virginia, where I live.
Yeah, which is great. So Canto 30 of Paradiso, we set ourselves a pretty big task, I would say, to try to talk about this in 20 minutes. And so we won't get to talk about everything, but we'll give it a shot. So Phil, I just want to start by asking, how do you read this canto today?
Well, first of all, it is a canto of the vision of the very highest heaven outside space and time, the most beautiful of all, only describable and then weakly by images of flowers. Heaven is a great rose, jewelry, a light of river, a river of light, and such imagery. But it is also a canto of contradiction in which Beatrice, the guide of Dante all through, the spiritual leader, the image of theology and of love, speaks very beautifully of heaven, but then also jumps very hard at the very end. It's her last speech in Divine Comedy about the wickedness of two terrible popes and the unfortunate early death of a good emperor, and leaves Dante with the thought, here's heaven so gloriously beautiful, and all you have to do to get here is be repentant of your sins and live for virtue and for God, and then you'll be happy forever. But look what really happens on earth. So it's a brilliant and magnificent vision of contrasts, one of them very painful.
Yeah, I definitely agree that one of the things that, I kind of think about responding to this canto today is really the kind of agon, the struggle between in the canto moving and leaving the poem behind, and then moving to the final few cantos of the project of the commedia as a whole. It's really like leaving behind the poetry, and that ends with that real kind of warning note, really, of Beatrice where we see the empty seat.
Yes, with Purgatorio 30, where Dante meets Beatrice, she tells him, yes, we're taking you up into heaven and you're going to see a whole lot of stuff and it's going to be very instructive. You will go back to earth and you will have to tell people who are much more in love with sin, that they've got to repent and they've got to straighten up and fly right. Flying right might be a good image. And Dante all the way through is learning repeatedly from wise men and from rulers and from his own great-great-grandfather, a warrior, and from all sorts of figures, that heaven is based on love and earth in large part is not. So it is nevertheless a very strange warning. I think it's fair to say that wickedness lives and has power on this earth, whereas goodness very often, no matter how good the people are, fails to achieve much or anything. And that's the grim side of the message of this canto, as it is of much of the whole comedy.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really hard to overstate, as we've been saying, the importance of Beatrice in this canto, where she's been leading Dante through the Paradiso, and then these are the final speeches that she has in the whole work to kind of push Dante into the next realm for him.
What's really remarkable too.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again, they have regular conversations all through Paradiso. Not invariably. Sometimes it's largely Beatrice or Beatrice. But in Canto 29, right before this, she speaks almost the entire canto uninterrupted.
Yeah.
There are a few lines at the beginning of interruption, and then it's her talk. This time, it reads as though it were a dialogue. because she speaks for 3 or 4 or 6 lines, and then we get a commentary and 3 or 4 or 6 more lines. But in fact, that's always Dante the narrator.
Mhm.
Not once in this poem, in this canto, does Dante the pilgrim speak. The
Yeah.
narrator tells you what he thought and what he heard from Beatrice, but he doesn't tell you exactly what he said at this extraordinary moment when he's rising into the Empyrean with her, the place beyond all space and time, where God truly reigns in the midst of the rose that is all of saved humanity.
Mhm.
It's a peculiar thing. It reads dramatically,
Yeah.
but in fact, there's only one speaker
Yeah.
present in the place.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. So why don't we take a closer look at some of those lines to
Sure.
really get into it? Because also I feel that we should emphasize that this is really in a poem of astounding beauty. Like this canto really outdoes itself. And so getting to spend some time with the real kind of like texture of the lines, I think would be a good idea.
Great. Yeah. Well, I will, you probably have several lines you want to talk about. The one passage that I think constitutes a sort of brief and stunning summary of the entire realization of the comedy comes when Beatrice speaks to Dante and says, now you're going to really get, in the briefest possible form, the lesson you need to learn. Here it is in Italian. Noi siamo usciti fuori dal maggior corpo al ciel che pura luce, luce intellettuale, piena d'amore, amor di vero ben, pien di letizia, letizia che trascende ogni doxore, which in my translation reads, we have arrived above the universe, in the heaven that is pure light, the light of understanding, full of love, love of the true good, endowed with joy, joy that transcends all mere delight. If you have, and of course Dante has, repented of your sins, and your thought, therefore, is open to truly transcendent light, the light of understanding. Now this, of course, in secular terms, this is also perfectly valid. If you can distract yourself from your distractions and focus on what really enlightens you as you think through any serious issue, one thing that happens is you are led toward love.
Mm-hmm.
You realize the value of love.
Yeah.
And once the value of love is fully realized in your existence, that's great. That's it. Of course, from Dante's point of view, this happens eternally with joy. Joy, of course, as we all know, in this earth is usually temporary.
Mm.
Heaven, it's permanent. But in the light of this poem as a poem for people here on earth, what we have here is a joy that even here on this earth, once you have allowed it to emerge out of the love of the true good, transcends all merely ordinary happiness or delight, or you could say fulfills it at least. So
Yeah.
what I said about this is that the passage is so brief, clear, and persuasive a promise of moral growth, it deserves to be cut in stone.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make a fair degree of sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's really true, because like if we even like think about kind of like the literary art of those like lines, I just like really respond to them very strongly, because like you just have such great patterning in it, where you have like the end, the three lines, they end with the luce, amore, and letizia.
Yeah.
And you have, those are the words which start the next lines.
The next line, yes, luce, amore, and letizia again.
Yeah, and so what it reminds me of is like looping a string and like tying it up together through the verse. It's like you really get the repetition is like building it, putting it forward. And of course, like the knots and ideas of knottedness and connectedness are like central to the work of the comedy as a whole.
It is indeed.
That's why, like, this really is kind of encapsulating a lot of what the canto and Dante is like trying to do throughout the work. Especially like the final line, which has that trascende in the middle of the line, balancing it to really point towards that we are moving.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in the canto as a whole, that's what the canto is really signaling, is that like at this point in Dante's journey, this is like the pivot where we are able to go into the highest reaches.
And indeed, very shortly after that, he rises up into the Empyrean. And this puzzling business at the end of the thing about the emperor will die, we're sorry, but the emperor's going to die and he will have accomplished nothing. And you're stuck, the fictional date is 1300, when Boniface VIII, who historians do regard as one of the first of all popes, was pope. And he's to be succeeded by Clement, Pope Clement, who was pretty terrible also, although most people don't think he had a patch for wickedness on Boniface. Well, what is that all about? For one thing, Dante has repeatedly learned from Beatrice that you have to trust the church. Well, you have to trust the church for baptism. You have to trust the church for instruction in faith, hope, and charity. You have to trust the church for the value of family life, which is strongly emphasized right in the middle.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't mean that you can trust the church for good abbots or bishops or popes. Some of them are good and some of them aren't. And St. Francis of Assisi says, yeah, I did the best I could, but my order is in terrible shape.
Yeah.
Benedict says the same thing, and St. Dominic says the same thing. And good popes, St. Peter, for example, says, my seat in Rome might as well be empty for all the good the popes are doing in it. So there's this contrast of the church as the true source of faith and virtue with the actual church leaders who are neither. Well, it is also true, of course, in any civic establishment, and this is a poem about being a good citizen. You can be a good citizen, honest and hard-working and loyal to the principles of your nation and zealous for your fellow people, but you can still have a government that combines incompetence with corruption at any level, including extraordinary levels. And Dante is acutely aware that combinations of incompetence and corruption are frequent and indeed prevailing in his own time. So that, in my judgment, that's why the canto ends in this distressing fashion.
Yeah, I think that's really right. That even at this kind of like moment of like acute transcendence and transfiguration, really, at the end of the journey, it's like you still can't leave behind the kind of fundamental problem of how humans interact with these like kind of topics and issues, and like how humans have to do the hard work of maintaining those kind of institutions, and how easily they can slide into more corruption and that kind of thing.
But on the other hand, Dante is learning, as he learns from Beatrice, as he experiences the glories of glory, how to live like a citizen and an honorable leader and a poet when he gets back home. And of course, he goes back home and writes the comedy. Well, writing the comedy is the fulfillment of his vocation as a poet. It is also the proof of his loyalty as a citizen. It is also the demonstration that he's the kind of poet. This is going all the way back to the beginning, because he meets Virgil and he calls Virgil famoso saggio, that famous sage. Virgil is the poet of the glory of empire. Virgil is a great poet, patriotic citizen, and a sage. Dante, especially in these last cantos of Paradiso, and particularly with this terrible contrast in Canto 30, he is demonstrating, man, if you think I'm a poet, you're absolutely right. There's not many people who could manage those 5 lines the way I did. If you think that I'm a patriot, you're absolutely right. I'm telling you how awful it is to have a failing empire. I have already told you what a terrible mess it is in Italian cities that make war on one another instead of building one another together. And listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. The light of understanding leads to love of the good, which issues in delight. How much more do you want?
Yeah, Yeah, I think that that's exactly right. And like one of the things that is like most extraordinary about this canto is how it's a completion, a summation of Dante as a poet, where we see this like most clearly in the lines that like take up a lot of the stanza, which are the canto, which are describing Beatrice's beauty, or rather not describing the beauty because he can't.
Oh, she's so beautiful, I can't describe it. Heaven is so beautiful, I can't describe it. Whereupon he does, you know. But
Yeah.
the line that you wanted to talk about in this connection, right around there, line 21, who can appreciate all of this stuff? You want to talk about solo sol fattor tutta la gola?
Yes, yeah, exactly. That in this like line, Dante's like saying like this beauty is of Beatrice is so surpassing that only he who created her can enjoy it. Which, and this is like a real kind of Dante move. It's like we read that and we're like, oh wow, only God can appreciate this beauty because even angels can't appreciate the beauty of Beatrice. But then we remember, oh no, Dante's the one who created Beatrice in this poem, in his work as a whole.
The historical.
And it's like a real kind of sly moment of saying,
great, yeah,
yeah.
She was an actual, young married woman who died young, and Dante and she met her, as far as we know, only very few times and casually. Historically, she's a footnote, but poetically, she's the center of the source of vision and wisdom and courage to live bravely in the teeth of everything. And Dante made her that. So he is il suo fattore, her maker.
Yeah, so it goes to show that like when we're reading this, we also have to be kind of cognizant of the poet's ego at work here, in these moments of humbleness, and humbleness really before beauty in the Empyrean, and the surpassing kind of experience of seeing the river of light, that we're still being reminded that this is all the creation of like Dante poet, with the references also to the first time that he saw Beatrice, which is again a reference to Vita Nuova earlier in Dante's writing career, that we can't forget that we're in the middle of this kind of created world that Dante has made for us.
Now you were going to refer to a more recent poet whose thinking and expression struck you as being relevant.
Yeah, I think that this perhaps is a good way for us to kind of draw to a close, because like when I was like thinking about this, and as we were talking about the role of beauty in these lines, it really reminded me of the contemporary American poet Robin Cost Lewis, who has written really movingly and powerfully about like beauty as kind of like contestation and like the power of beauty and not letting beauty go. And Lewis writes that beauty might be the greatest territory of all, the ultimate terrain over which we struggle, because it's about who and what gets to be cherished. I think that those lines really resonate in the work of what Dante is like trying to do in this canto as a whole, to create this beauty out of language and pushes beyond it.
Well, yeah, the Cost Lewis statement must be defended, guarded, cherished, and who and what gets to be cherished. This is a canto in which Dante helps us to understand also what it means to guard and to cherish everything that we have learned is beautiful.
Yes.
And in the teeth of whatever obstacles we confront in our particular political or cultural situation, sometimes those obstacles are mountain high.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the reminder, really something that I think that we can take from this is just like the continued struggle of the definitions and redefinitions of beauty, and how to render that in language, and how to really use all of those resources available to us to gather together, even as it's incredibly hard to recognize the struggle to create something and not let go of beauty.
And one final thing, The last remarks of Dante in the poem are in the canto are fairly lengthy, lines 82 to 127. And in all of that passage, what he's doing is he is reassuring us that through everything that he has endured, he retains faith, faith in God, faith in salvation, but also faith in his own capacity and the capacity of other people who pursue wisdom to communicate with one another, to share the vision of life as it can be, as we can make it, if we will.
Yeah, I think that that's a great note to end on. That as we're all kind of thinking about quarantine, certainly in the US at the moment,
Yes.
and we're all in the socially distanced realm, it's like, well, actually, the greatest task now is to build those greater connections between us.
Let us hope that we can do that. He does have a line so elsewhere in this canto about the difference it is when we let our masks drop.
Yes, yeah.
Let us hope that there will be a time soon when we can pal around with people and let our masks drop.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you very much.